some remote areas of Japan, there are some well-known haunted tunnels, and Echo Hill is one of them. Many say that several accidents have happened here, and some people have even committed suicide in the tunnel, which makes the atmosphere especially eerie. Particularly late at night, it's said that Echo Hill Tunnel is filled with strange whispering voices that lead those with too much curiosity to an inescapable horror. One of the stories goes like this. One night, a young office worker named Ken had just finished overtime, feeling exhausted as he drove home. He lived in the suburbs, and the road home required him to pass through the famous Echo Hill Tunnel. Ken wasn't superstitious, though he had heard some rumors about the tunnel, but he thought, as a modern man, how could he be scared by such stories? He turned up the music in his car, hoping to get through quickly. But just as he entered the tunnel, he felt the temperature drop suddenly, as if the air conditioning had been turned down to the lowest setting, making him shiver. The lights in the tunnel were dim, and the car headlights only illuminated a small section of the road ahead. Just as he was about to speed up and get out of there, he suddenly heard a faint sound coming from the back seat.
Help me!
Ken jumped in shock, his hands trembling slightly, almost losing control of the steering wheel. Nervously, he glanced at the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, nothing there. But then the voice came again, clearer this time, as if it was right by his ear. It said, "Help me, please." The voice sounded like a woman crying, filled with despair. Ken tried to convince himself it was just an illusion, that he was too tired. But the voice kept repeating over and over, getting more urgent and more piercing, as if someone was coming closer to him. Cold sweat started to form on Ken's forehead, and he couldn't help but ask softly,
"Who are you? Where are you?"
The moment he finished speaking, a pale face suddenly appeared in the rearview mirror. It was a woman's face, covered in cracks with wet hair sticking to it. Her empty eyes stared at him, her mouth slightly open, almost like she was smiling. Ken's heart nearly stopped, and he instinctively slammed on the gas pedal, making the car lurch forward. His vision blurred, and he had only one thought: to escape, to get away from there. Finally, Ken shot out of the tunnel, and the car headlights lit up the road ahead. He panted heavily, quickly pulled over to the side of the road and looked back at the rear seat. Nothing. The rearview mirror was also empty, as if everything that just happened was a hallucination. Ken's hands were trembling badly. He hurriedly took out his phone, wanting to call a friend, but just as his finger touched the screen, suddenly he saw the reflection of that woman's face on his phone, right behind him. The next day, people found Ken's car not far from the tunnel, with the door wide open, but no one inside. Later, some said Ken's disappearance might be related to the supernatural events in that tunnel, as those who respond to ghosts at night are often never seen again. The next story takes place in some public restrooms in Japan, especially in schools or old public facilities. These places are damp and dark, often giving people a sense of unease. In Japan, there's a popular urban legend called red paper, blue paper, which is said to appear in these kinds of places. One story tells of a high school girl named Mika. She had heard plenty of stories at school, but she never really took them seriously. She thought those ghost stories were mostly meant to scare children. After all, she had never actually seen anything supernatural herself. So when her classmates talked about the red paper, blue paper story from the old school building's restroom, she just laughed it off. One day after school, Mika stayed late for her club activities. By the time she was ready to head home, it was already dark. As she passed by the old school building, she suddenly felt her stomach ache and decided to go inside and use the restroom. The restroom in the old building was always considered haunted because it was old and poorly maintained, with dim lights and peeling, moldy walls and a damp, musty smell in the air. Mika pushed open the restroom door, and sure enough, there was no one inside. Only an old cracked mirror reflected her tired face. She walked into the last stall, thinking she'd quickly finish and leave. But just as she was about to stand up, a deep, cold voice suddenly came from above her head.
Red paper or blue paper?
Mika's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her mind going blank. She forced herself to think it might be a prank by a classmate hiding outside to scare her. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said,
Who are you? Stop messing around.
But the voice repeated, still calm and cold,
Red paper or blue paper?
A chill ran down Mika's spine. She suddenly remembered the rumor her classmates had talked about. If you chose red paper, you would be torn apart until you were covered in blood. If you chose blue paper, you would be strangled until your face turned blue. No matter what you chose, the outcome would be death. Her thoughts were in turmoil, sweat dripping down her forehead. Just then, she remembered a way to escape. If you said, "I don't need paper," you might be able to get away. Trembling, she whispered.
I don't need paper.
There was a deathly silence. The voice didn't come again, and the restroom was eerily quiet, as if time had stopped. Mika gathered her courage, quickly got herself together, and pushed open the stall door. She ran to the sink, not daring to look at the mirror, quickly washed her hands, and rushed out of the restroom. She ran out of the old school building and didn't stop until she reached the school gate, nearly collapsing in exhaustion. She looked back at the dark old building and thought she saw a pair of eyes watching her intently from behind a broken window. After that, Mika never dared to go near the old school building again. And the legend of the red paper, blue paper continued to spread around the school. No one knew the truth, and no one dared to try and find out. Only those who experienced it knew that the fear of death was very real.